The dust swirled thick in the afternoon heat of Tombstone, Arizona Territory, 1882. The sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift platform erected in the town square, where a crowd of rough men gathered like vultures around carrion. Among them stood Elena Vasquez, her wrists bound, her once pristine dress now torn and stained from days of captivity. "What am I bid for this fine specimen?" shouted Buck Morrison, a grizzled outlaw whose gang had raided the Vasquez family ranch 3 days prior. "Young, strong, can cook and mend. Perfect for any man needing a woman to tend his affairs." Elena's dark eyes burned with defiance despite her fear. At 19, she'd been the pride of her family's small ranch outside Tucson, educated, spirited, fluent in both Spanish and English. Now she stood like livestock, her father's blood still fresh in her memory, her mother's screams echoing in her nightmares. The bidding started at $20. Coarse laughter filled the air as men evaluated her like a horse at market. Elena's jaw clenched as she fought back tears, refusing to give these animals the satisfaction of seeing her break. From the shadow of a weathered building, Joseph Crow Feather watched with growing anger. The Apache warrior, 32 years old and scarred by loss, had come to town for supplies. His weathered face remained impassive, but his dark eyes revealed a storm brewing within. He had lost his own wife and daughter to cavalry raids 5 years ago, sold into slavery themselves before meeting worse fates. "$40!" called out Jake Sullivan, leader of the Red Canyon gang. His yellow teeth flashed in a cruel grin. "I got plans for this little wildcat." Sullivan's reputation was known throughout the territory. Women who fell into his hands were never seen again, disappearing into the maze of caves and canyons where his gang holed up. Elena's eyes found his, and she saw her death sentence written in his leering expression. The bidding continued. $50. $60. Elena's heart pounded as Sullivan raised his hand repeatedly, outbidding the others with the confidence of a man who always got what he wanted. $75, Sullivan shouted, his voice cutting through the desert air. The crowd fell silent. It was more money than most of these men saw in 3 months. Buck Morrison raised his gavel. 75 going once, $100. The voice was quiet, but carried like thunder. All heads turned toward the source. Joseph Crow Feather stepped forward, his long black hair braided with leather strips, his buckskin clothing marking him clearly as Apache. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "Indians got no business here," Sullivan snarled, his hand instinctively moving to his gun. "This is white man's trade." Joseph's eyes never left Morrison's face. "My money's as good as his," he said in perfect English, his voice steady and controlled. He reached into his leather pouch and pulled out a collection of silver coins, nuggets of gold, and precious turquoise stones, the savings of years of hunting, trading, and careful accumulation. Elena stared at this unexpected savior. She had expected brutality from white outlaws, but an Apache warrior's motives remained a mystery. Was she simply jumping from one nightmare into another? Morrison's eyes gleamed at the sight of the gold. Greed overcame prejudice in an instant. "Well now, money talks in any language. Do I hear 110? Sullivan's face turned purple with rage. "You can't seriously consider—" $120, Joseph interrupted, dumping more of his precious belongings onto the platform. A silver bracelet that had belonged to his grandmother. A rifle he had traded 2 horses for. Everything he owned of value lay there in the dust. The crowd murmured uneasily. Many had never seen an Apache up close, let alone one conducting business in their town. Some hands drifted toward weapons, but Morrison's authoritative voice cut through the tension. "Anyone else?" Morrison called out, his eyes scanning the crowd. Sullivan opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he had been outbid by more money than he could gather. Sold to the Apache. As Joseph stepped forward to claim his purchase, Elena met his eyes for the first time. She expected to see the same predatory gleam she had seen in Sullivan's gaze. Instead, she found something that surprised her, a deep, ancient sadness mixed with determined resolve. "You speak English?" Joseph asked quietly as he cut her bonds with a sharp knife. "Yes," she whispered, rubbing her chafed wrists. "Good. My name is Joseph Crowfeather. You are safe now." Elena wanted to believe him, but trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. As they walked away from the platform, she could feel Sullivan's burning glare following them, and she knew this was far from over. The sun was beginning to set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Elena followed her unexpected purchaser toward his horse, wondering if she had just traded one form of captivity for another, or if perhaps for the first time in days, hope might actually have a chance to survive. The ride from Tombstone stretched into the evening, with Joseph leading Elena away from the town on his sturdy Mustang while she rode behind him. The desert air grew cool as darkness approached, and Elena pulled the torn shawl closer around her shoulders. They hadn't spoken since leaving the auction. Elena's mind raced with questions and fears. Where was he taking her? What did he expect in return for his purchase? She had heard stories about Apache warriors. Some painted them as brutal savages, others as noble fighters defending their homeland. She no longer knew what to believe about anything. Joseph seemed to sense her unease. Without turning around, he spoke in his measured tone. "There's a mission about 2 hours north. Father Miguel runs it. You'll be safe there." Elena blinked in surprise. "You're taking me to a mission?" "Yes. But you paid all that money for me. Don't you expect—" Joseph pulled the horse to a stop and turned to face her. In the fading light, his weathered features looked carved from stone, but his eyes held a gentleness that contrasted with his imposing presence. "I expect nothing from you, except that you live free," he said simply. "No person should be bought or sold like cattle." For the first time in days, Elena felt tears of relief rather than fear. "I don't understand. Why would you do this for a stranger?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. 5 years ago, cavalry soldiers raided my village while the men were away hunting. They took my wife, Ayana, and my daughter, Little Dove, sold them to traders heading to Mexico. His hands tightened on the reins. I tracked them for weeks, but by the time I found where they had been taken—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Elena understood. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Since then, I've made it my duty to stop such things when I can. The gold and silver, the weapons I traded, they meant nothing compared to a life." As they continued riding, Elena found herself studying her rescuer with new eyes. Joseph Crowfeather was not the savage she had been taught to fear, but a man driven by loss to protect others from the same fate. "My family," Elena said quietly. "They killed my father, my mother. I don't know what happened to her. Tell me about them." As they rode through the star-filled desert night, Elena shared her story. Her father, Miguel Vasquez, had been an educated man who owned a small but prosperous ranch. He had taught Elena to read and write in both Spanish and English, believing education was the key to surviving in the changing world. Her mother, Rosa, had been known throughout the territory for her kindness and her skill with healing herbs. "Papa always said we had to be bridges between worlds," Elena said. "Mexican, American, Apache. We were all trying to live on the same land." Joseph nodded approvingly. "Your father was wise. Too few understand this." They reached the Mission San Xavier just as the moon reached its peak. The whitewashed adobe building stood like a beacon in the darkness, its bells silent but welcoming. Father Miguel, an elderly Mexican priest with kind eyes and silver hair, emerged as they approached. "Joseph," the priest called out in Spanish-accented English. "It's been too long, my friend." "Father Miguel," Joseph replied, dismounting and helping Elena down. "I have brought someone who needs sanctuary." The priest's eyes immediately understood the situation. He had seen too many victims of the brutal trade that flourished in the lawless territories. "Come inside, child. You're safe here." As Eleanor was led inside for food and rest, she turned back to Joseph. Will I see you again? Joseph paused in mounting his horse. If God wills it. Joseph, Father Miguel called out. Sullivan and his men were here yesterday asking questions. They're looking for something or someone. Elena's blood ran cold. Joseph's expression darkened. They won't stop, Elena realized aloud. Sullivan won't just let this go. No, Joseph agreed. Men like him don't accept defeat easily. Father Miguel stepped forward. There's something else, Joseph. Word is that Sullivan has put out a bounty on you, $500 to anyone who brings him the Apache who embarrassed him in Tombstone. Elena felt her heart sink. By saving her, Joseph had painted a target on his own back. This is my fault. I've brought danger to both of you. Evil men create their own danger, Joseph said firmly. You are not responsible for their choices. But as Elena watched Joseph ride away into the desert night, she knew that Sullivan's thirst for revenge would not be easily quenched. The salvation Joseph had offered her had come at a terrible price, one that might cost him everything. Inside the mission, as Father Miguel showed her to a simple but clean room, Elena made a silent vow. Joseph Crowfeather had risked everything to give her freedom. If Sullivan came for him, she would not hide behind mission walls while her savior faced danger alone. The desert wind howled outside, carrying with it the promise of storms ahead. 3 days passed peacefully at Mission San Xavier. Elena helped Father Miguel with daily tasks, tending the small garden, preparing meals, and caring for the few travelers who sought shelter. The routine gave her time to heal physically and emotionally from her ordeal, but her thoughts constantly returned to Joseph Crowfeather. On the 4th morning, those thoughts were interrupted by the thunder of approaching horses. "Eleanor, quickly!" Father Miguel whispered urgently, appearing at her side as she hung laundry in the courtyard. "Hide in the cellar, now!" Through the mission's front gates rode Jake Sullivan and 5 of his men, their horses kicking up clouds of dust in the morning sun. Sullivan's cold eyes scanned the mission grounds like a predator searching for prey. "Morning, Padre," Sullivan called out, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Lovely day, ain't it?" Father Miguel stepped forward, his elderly frame deceptively frail, but his voice strong. "Mr. Sullivan, what brings you to our peaceful mission?" "Oh, just looking for some lost property," Sullivan drawled, dismounting. His men spread out, clearly searching for something or someone. "See, a few days back some Apache buck stole something that rightfully belonged to me. Word is, he might have brought it here. I'm afraid I don't understand. We offer sanctuary to all who seek it, but we harbor no stolen goods." Sullivan's hand rested on his gun handle. "Now, Padre, let's not play games. I paid good money for that Mexican girl, and some redskin made a fool of me in front of half of Tombstone. That don't sit well with a man of my reputation." From her hiding spot in the cellar, Eleanor could hear every word through the wooden floorboards. Her hands clenched into fists. She couldn't let this kind old priest face danger because of her. "Even if such a person were here," Father Miguel said carefully, "the mission offers sanctuary. It's blessed ground, Mr. Sullivan." Sullivan's laugh was harsh and cold. "Blessed ground don't stop bullets, old man. Now I'm going to search every inch of this place, and if I find what I'm looking for, maybe you get to keep breathing." Elena made her decision. She couldn't hide while others risked their lives for her safety. She pushed open the cellar door and stepped into the courtyard, her chin raised defiantly. "I'm here," she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "There's no need to threaten the father." Sullivan's eyes lit up with triumph and something darker. "Well, well, there's my property. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, girl." "I'm not your property," Elena said firmly. "I'm not anyone's property." "See, that's where you're wrong." Sullivan stepped closer, his men forming a loose circle around the courtyard. "I paid for you fair and square. That Apache might have outbid me, but word is he's been having some accidents lately. Arrows don't help much against rifle bullets, turns out." Elena's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Sullivan's grin was cruel. Let's just say your Apache friend won't be interfering in my business anymore. Boys found him this morning about 10 miles south. Shame how dangerous the desert can be." "You're lying," Elena whispered, but fear crept into her voice. "Am I? Bring me proof, Daniels." One of Sullivan's men stepped forward, holding something that made Elena's breath catch. It was Joseph's distinctive silver bracelet, the one that had belonged to his grandmother, the same one he had been willing to trade for her freedom. Elena's knees nearly buckled. If Joseph was truly dead, it was because he had shown her kindness. The weight of that guilt threatened to crush her. "Now then," Sullivan continued, "you're coming with me, and this time there ain't gonna be no auction. You belong to me now, and I intend to make sure you understand that real clear." As Sullivan reached for her arm, Eleanor jerked back. "No, I won't go with you. You don't have a choice, girl." But before Sullivan could grab her, a new voice cut through the morning air, low, dangerous, and very much alive. "She's right. She doesn't belong to you." Every head turned toward the mission's entrance. There, silhouetted against the morning sun, stood Joseph Crow Feather. He was wounded. Elena could see blood staining his shirt and a makeshift bandage around his left arm, but he was very much alive and very much angry. Sullivan's face went white. "That's impossible. My men said—" "Your men found my horse and some of my belongings where I left them," Joseph said, stepping into the courtyard. His rifle was ready, and his eyes held the cold focus of a trained warrior. "Did you really think I would ride straight into an obvious trap?" Elena's heart soared with relief and terror in equal measure. Joseph was alive, but now he was walking into an even more dangerous situation. "You should have stayed hidden, Apache," Sullivan snarled, his hand moving to his gun. "Now I get to finish what my boys started, and I still get my property back." "The only thing you'll get," Joseph said quietly, "is the chance to ride away and never come back. Take it." Sullivan looked around at his 5 men, then back at the lone Apache warrior. The odds seemed clearly in his favor. What he didn't realize was that he was facing a man who had already lost everything once and would not let it happen again. "Kill him," Sullivan ordered. The morning erupted in gunfire and chaos, with Elena caught in the middle of a battle that would determine not just her fate, but the very meaning of honor in a land where both were too often treated as commodities to be bought and sold. The first shot rang out like thunder in the mission courtyard, but it wasn't Sullivan's men who fired. Joseph had moved with the fluid grace of a seasoned warrior, diving behind the mission's stone well as bullets whined overhead. His return shot dropped one of Sullivan's men instantly. "Helena, stay down!" Father Miguel shouted, pulling her behind the thick adobe walls of the mission building. What followed was not the quick massacre Sullivan had expected, but a tactical battle between a desperate outlaw and a warrior who had learned to survive against impossible odds. Joseph used every shadow, every corner of the mission's architecture to his advantage. "Fan out!" Sullivan roared to his remaining men. "He's just one man!" But Joseph Crow Feather wasn't just any man. Years of fighting cavalry patrols had taught him how to make every shot count, how to move like a ghost, and how to turn an enemy's numbers against them. As Sullivan's men spread out, they became easier targets, not harder ones. Elena watched in amazement and terror as Joseph systematically evened the odds. His rifle cracked again, and another outlaw fell. When Daniels tried to flank him from the left, Joseph was already moving, appearing behind him like a shadow to silence him permanently. "This is taking too long," Sullivan growled, grabbing Elena and pressing his gun to her head. "Apache, show yourself, or the girl dies." The gunfire stopped. Joseph emerged from behind the mission's bell tower, his rifle lowered but still ready. "Let her go, Sullivan. Your fight is with me." "My fight is with anyone who costs me money and respect," Sullivan snarled. "You made me look like a fool in Tombstone. Now I'm going to make you watch while I—" Sullivan never finished his sentence. Elena, remembering her father's lessons about never being a helpless victim, drove her elbow back into his stomach with all her strength. As he doubled over, gasping, she broke free and ran toward Joseph. The remaining two outlaws raised their weapons, but they were caught between divided targets. Joseph's rifle spoke twice in rapid succession, and suddenly Sullivan found himself alone, with two dead men and an empty gun. "It's over, Sullivan," Joseph said, his rifle trained on the outlaw leader. "Your men are dead. You're outnumbered." Sullivan's face twisted with rage and desperation. "You think this ends here, Redskin? You think killing me solves anything? There's 100 more like me, and they all know your face now." "Then I'll face them as they come," Joseph replied calmly. "But you won't be one of them." For a moment, the two men stared at each other across the blood-stained courtyard, representatives of two different worlds, two different codes of honor. Sullivan represented the chaos and greed that was consuming the frontier, while Joseph embodied an older way of thinking, where honor and protection of the innocent mattered more than profit. "You could have just walked away," Joseph said quietly. "You could have let her go and found another life. Instead, you chose this." Sullivan's hand inched toward the knife at his belt. "I ain't done yet." But Elena saw the movement first. "Joseph, look out!" Sullivan lunged forward with the blade, but Joseph was ready. The two men grappled for a moment. Then there was a flash of steel, and Sullivan collapsed, the knife falling from his lifeless fingers. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena ran to Joseph, seeing the fresh blood seeping through his shirt where Sullivan's blade had found its mark. "You're hurt," she said, her voice thick with concern. "I'll live," Joseph replied, though his breathing was labored. "Are you harmed?" "No, thanks to you." Elena helped him sit against the well. "Both times now you've saved my life." Father Miguel emerged from the mission building, his face pale but relieved. "We must tend to your wounds, Joseph, and we need to send word to the territorial marshal about what happened here." As Elena helped clean and bandage Joseph's wounds, she found herself studying his face. The strong jaw, the weathered skin that spoke of years under the desert sun, the dark eyes that had seen too much loss but still held compassion. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the desert beyond the mission walls. "In my tribe, we believe that every soul has value. When someone's spirit is in danger, those who can help have a duty to act. It's not about knowing someone, it's about recognizing their humanity." "And what happens now?" Elena asked. "Sullivan's gang will come looking for him eventually." "Let them come," Joseph said simply. "But I don't think they will. Men like Sullivan's followers are cowards at heart. Without him to lead them, they'll scatter like leaves in the wind." Father Miguel brought them food and fresh water. As the three of them sat in the mission courtyard, surrounded by the evidence of the morning's violence, Elena realized that her life had fundamentally changed. The frightened ranch girl who had been sold at auction was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had seen both the worst and best of human nature. "I want to learn," she said suddenly. Both men looked at her questioningly. "I want to learn to defend myself, to shoot, to fight if necessary. I never want to be helpless again." Joseph nodded approvingly. "Strength comes in many forms. Physical strength is only one of them. But yes, I can teach you if you wish. And I can teach you to read the sacred texts," Father Miguel added. "Knowledge is also a form of protection." Eleanor looked from one man to the other, the Apache warrior who had traded everything for her freedom, and the Mexican priest who had offered her sanctuary without question. In their faces, she saw the possibility of a different kind of future, one where the divisions between races and cultures might someday matter less than the shared human values that connected them all. "There's something else," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I want to help others who are in the situation I was in. There are more women being sold, more families being destroyed. If we don't stop it, who will?" Joseph smiled for the first time since she had known him, a small, genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "Your father was right. You are a bridge between worlds." "Ta'i." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Elena Vasquez began to understand that her captivity and rescue had been more than just a personal ordeal. It had been the beginning of something larger, a mission to fight the injustices that thrived in the lawless spaces between civilizations. The three unlikely allies sat together as darkness fell, planning not just for their own survival, but for the battles yet to come. In a land where human dignity was too often treated as a commodity, they would stand as guardians of something more precious than gold: the simple truth that every person deserved to be free. The desert wind carried their voices into the night, where the spirits of the land seemed to whisper their approval. Some battles end with victory, others end with the beginning of a greater war. This was one of the latter. The small school Elena had established near the mission was unlike anything the Arizona Territory had seen before. Mexican children sat beside Apache students, while the children of Anglo settlers learned alongside them all. Elena taught reading and writing in 3 languages, while Joseph instructed the older students in tracking, survival, and respect for the natural world. Father Miguel watched from the mission doorway, a proud smile on his weathered face. "Your father would be amazed to see what you've built here, Elena." Elena looked up from the slate board where she was teaching a young Apache girl to write her name in English. "Papa always said education was the best weapon against ignorance. I think he'd approve." The sound of approaching riders made everyone freeze. Even 6 months later, the sound still triggered memories of Sullivan and his gang. But these riders bore the badges of territorial marshals, and their leader was someone Elena recognized. "Miss Vasquez," Marshal Thompson called out as he dismounted. "Good to see you well." "Marshal," Elena replied warmly. "What news from Tombstone?" "Good news, mostly. That network of slave traders you helped us map out, we've broken most of it up, arrested 15 men last month alone." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "There's something else, though. We found your mother." Elena's heart stopped. "My mother, Rosa Vasquez. She's alive. Alive and asking for you. She's in Tucson, recovering at the Sisters of Mercy Hospital. Took some doing to track her down, but she's going to be fine." For the first time in months, Eleanor felt tears of pure joy. She looked at Joseph, who was already nodding his approval. "Go," he said gently. "Family is everything. We'll keep the school running until you return." "When I return," Elena corrected firmly. "This is my home now. These are my people. All of them." As Elena prepared for the journey to Tucson, she reflected on how much had changed since that terrible day at the auction block. She had been sold as property and rescued by a stranger, but in the process, she had discovered her true purpose, building bridges between worlds that too often saw only their differences. Joseph Crowfeather had traded everything to buy her freedom. In return, she had given him something equally valuable: proof that the code of honor he lived by could create real change in the world. The desert that had once seemed like a hostile wasteland now felt like home. And in a land where the law was often written by whoever had the fastest gun, Elena Vasquez had learned to write her own rules. Rules based on dignity, respect, and the radical idea that every human being deserved to be free. The school bell rang, calling the children back from their lunch break. Elena smiled as she watched Apache, Mexican, and Anglo children running together across the desert landscape. This was the future her father had dreamed of, a world where the color of your skin mattered less than the content of your character. Jake Sullivan had seen her as property to be owned. Joseph Crowfeather had seen her as a human being to be protected. But Elena had discovered something even more powerful. She was a force to be reckoned with, a bridge builder in a land that desperately needed healing. The story that had begun with an auction would continue with education, justice, and the quiet revolution of people choosing to see humanity in each other despite every reason to do otherwise. In the end, that might be the most valuable trade of all.